Double tone. Haha. Thanks for tuning in and welcome to after summer vacation, whatever, back on streaming. You just listened to one of the tracks from my upcoming album Elements. I'm really happy about this release. There is a new box underneath the streaming window where you can find a link to get the album and find more info on my website www.de-tune.de. Hey guys, so as the title of today's stream implies, I am a little bit afraid that we won't get much into music making today because this is totally techy, nerdy stuff today. Because the last 1.5 weeks, pretty much, I have spent setting up an entirely new template because I bought. Where is it? Where is it? There we go. The new, well, for me, new Vienna Ensemble Pro 6. And this is pretty incredible. At least in terms for my workflow and how I use Cubase and my computers. Actually, now I can add an S to computer because I'm running with a slave as well. More on that in a little bit. So, what is the main difference with Vienna Ensemble Pro in regarding to my old template? So, as some of you may know, my old template was making use of the track disable function in Cubase, where you load pretty much one instance of contact for whatever instruments you want to use in your template and deactivate it so it doesn't eat any of the RAM, and you just with a single button of a mouse click or of a key, you can reactivate the instrument and have it at hand. Which is pretty cool in itself, and it has been working great so far, but one of the greatest downsides of this approach is the more instances of contact you reinitiate, the larger the Cubase file size of the Cubase project itself gets. So when you have 50, 60 instances of contact activated, you easily end up with kind of 1.2 gigabyte of file size for a single Cubase project. Plus the saving time adds up enormously. So when you have kind of a 5-minute autosave and it takes 20 seconds to save the project, then it can get really annoying. So you either increase the save time so they save every 15 or 20 minutes or something like that, or you totally get rid of it and then you're risking losing stuff that you've been working on. Anyway, so this was one of the downsides of the all within Cubase approach. And the thing so far with Vienna Ensemble Pro has been that it was great to host everything outside of Cubase and keep the file size small, but you had to load everything pretty much. You had to have everything loaded. You could purge the samples, but that's not the best approach in my opinion, because when you open up an instrument and want to play it, and then it starts to load only the samples you play, I found it laggy and sluggish somehow, so it didn't really work out. So with the new Vienna Ensemble Pro, you now have the option to load an instance of contact, for example, and enable and disable. So pretty much the same that you could have been doing in Cubase before, you can now do in Vienna Ensemble Pro. And this is, you can remotely control this from Cubase. I will go into further detail how this is actually set up. And another thing that I wanted to have, I got rid of having individual channels for individual articulations. So I went back to key switching. Thanks to a little bit of research, and a big shout out to, forgive me if I mispronounce the name, Mikhel Zilmer, I guess. He posted some videos of his template approach, and I took a lot of that for me, for my template and how I set it up. So big thanks to him for posting this stuff online, and I just tweaked it to my needs. So first things first, I was thinking a while how can I actually do it to get my iPad onto the screen. Ta-da! There we go. So this that you can see on top of the Cubase screen now is actually my iPad screen that's streaming through AirPlay. And there you can see pretty much what I've done there. The first page is control page for Cubase and stuff like that. I will go into further detail. But the main important thing for me was when I select a channel in Cubase with a certain articulation. For example, here we have first violins, chamber strings. When I click that channel, my iPad changes to the corresponding key switch page for this instrument. Same with, for example, cinematic studio strings, adventure strings. Actually, here's a little bit more stuff because I had some more space here to fill. So the first chairs from Berlin are set up here as well. So when I go back to chamber strings and then select the first chair, it jumps back to the same page. And this pretty much goes throughout with ensemble pages like Albion 1 and the Iceni stuff. Then with brass it goes on the same. When we have Spitfire brass and sample modeling, it's actually not changing here because I'm not entirely finished with every single instrument here. So I need to add a few key switch pages to the iPad controller. But for example, when I click on the Metropolis Arc brass, then you can see I have a brass page for different libraries. Adventure brass uses the same with some key switches. And then we go on with woodwinds. When I switch to Piccolos of Berlin, then it jumps to the Berlin woodwind page, etc., etc. So this is something I have been kind of thinking for a long time how to actually get this running, but it finally works and I'm really happy with that. Mikhel, as far as I know, uses Lemur as a controller, and he took it a step further to have one page and it gets populated with the corresponding key switches, whatever channel he selects. So I haven't done that, but I'm fine with the approach that I have running now. So this works pretty great. And right now, let me go back to the control page. And having this much of instruments available, you can see it up here. We're close to 1,000 tracks now, although not all of these are instrument tracks, so half of these, because we have the group tracks and the instrument tracks. And if I get rid of these, so this is the actual number of MIDI tracks minus a few folder tracks. So around 500 tracks right now. So I'm still not finished populating the whole template, so there is more coming. But for now, I wanted just to show you guys how it works and what you can do with it, or what I can do with it. Back to the front page of the iPad. So when I set up certain triggers, so because navigating a huge template like this can be tedious when you kind of worked on the strings and then want to do something in the percussion or with ethnic instruments and stuff like that. Does this also mean that you're using a 500 instance of Contact? Pretty much, yes. It's not totally, because some instruments are put together. But overall, it's one instrument, one Contact. So, and we were on navigating, right? So do some strings, and then I want to add some piano, and then I need to jump down. So this controller page helps me to narrow things down. For example, On the right side, you see tracks with data, show all, show loaded. For example, when I click on show loaded, it shows me all the tracks that are active, like so the piano is loaded. You're using tracks, right? Not recs. For this template, I'm using rec instruments. All the rec instruments are the Ensemble Pro. So track instruments are just for some stuff that I have within the Cubase project that does not sit in VEPro. Back to the control page. So I can narrow it down to only tracks that are loaded right now. So or I can, of course, show all the tracks. And then with the buttons on the left side that you can see high strings, low strings, etc. I can narrow it down to, for example, if I click on low strings, then it just shows me the low strings in my template. If I click on ensemble brass, obviously I get all the ensemble brass patches. High woodwinds gives me all the high woodwinds and stuff like that. So this is how it works essentially. If I click on guitars, then it does not work. Great. Now. So so you can see the button light up when I hit it on my iPad. So let me bring this window down a little bit so that it doesn't get too much in the way. So you understood hopefully how it's meant to work. Maybe we get rid of the window anyway. For now I keep it in the stream window so that you can see what the iPad is doing. So let me get back to show all tracks. No. Yeah, there we go. So one thing that I mentioned right in the beginning, what I've changed is I'm incorporating this guy now. So this is my mobile system that I recently bought. Essentially, I wanted to have a system that is pretty much similar to my main workstation for on the go, for whenever I need to work mobile. But when I'm not working mobile and I'm at home, I found why not use this thing as a slave, since it has a pretty good amount of RAM and a good processor. So I am using now my main DAW with VEPro 6 and have VEPro 6 on my slave. And everything I try to have as much as possible remotely controllable so that I don't need to turn to my other screen and do stuff there. And for the stuff where I knew that I need to reach the GUI to tweak something or change parameters or whatever, these instruments I have loaded in my DAW so that I can just access them on the second screen. More on that later. So how does it essentially work? So right now when I click, for example, the viola cinematic studio strings, you don't hear anything. And on the iPad screen in the bottom left you can see enable and disable, and this is pretty much labeled because that's what it does. So I click the button on the iPad and the MIDI track gets unmuted and gets loaded, in this case on my slave, and I can switch the articulations on the iPad. I can also record the articulations when I click on the iPad. So I'm just clicking through some of these, and it didn't record anything, so that worked greatly. So now when we access the articulation, you can see the key switches that I recorded as expression map data in Cubase. So, and I can tweak that later on if I want to whatever articulation I want. So that works pretty great. Does this only work in combination with the expression maps? Well, at least expression map help a lot to distribute instruments on one channel, because some of the instruments I have use, for example, in Contact channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and via the key switches I change the MIDI channel that I send the data. This works awesomely in expression maps. I have no idea how that works without expression maps, to be honest. If you just use key switches, for example, you don't necessarily need the expression maps. If you don't have these maps, it will just record the key switches down here. So you have the key switches in the score. There's another advantage of the expression maps, that you don't have any additional notes in the score that pretty much don't belong there. And you did make these maps, yeah. These maps are now all custom made because I switched all the articulations. For example, on Spitfire chamber strings, I use the UACC from Spitfire for the articulation switching, and most of the key switches I put down to C-2 to have it at least convenient between all the instruments. So another thing, so now the viola is loaded, let's get rid of that, and when I hit the disable button on my iPad, it disables the track in VEPro, and so unloads it from RAM, so I don't need it anymore, and also mutes this little MIDI track here. Actually, the mute function does not really do anything, so it does not really mute an instrument that is loaded. Let me show you that with the album strings, for example, here. So when I mute this, it still plays, but I didn't want to use that actually as a mute button, but it helps me to define rules for the logical editor. So when I was wondering, how do I get a visual feedback whether a track is loaded or not in VEPro? I didn't find a way to have send the info to the iPad when I click on a track, for example, and it changes the iPad button here. It would be ideal if the button lights up when it's loaded, and it doesn't when it's not loaded. So I didn't get that to work. So the mute button is a little bit of a workaround. So anything that is not muted means it is loaded. So when I unload it and hit the disable button, essentially what it's doing, it's sending the MIDI trigger to disable the channel in VEPro, and it sends key shortcut M to switch the channel to mute status. So that way I know when a channel is muted that it's not loaded, and when I want to load it, I just enable it on the iPad, and then we're good to go. So this is one of the first things. So some people have been asking, how does it actually work to enable or disable in VEPro? So let's take, for example, the London Contemporary from Spitfire. Use the spiccato here. Not there yet because it's the load. Okay, great. Why is that not working? I have no idea. It worked when I tried it before. Let me check this. Ah, I know why. Because I changed the channels, I think. So this is, yeah, exactly. Let me shortly fix that because I've been working on that in the afternoon. So I need to correct the MIDI channels here. So this is 6 and 3. Okay, save that. So that's a way better saving time, 2 seconds or something like that. Back to topic. We have the violin LCO, and I knew why it wasn't working because it wasn't set to channel 1. I was trying out different things here, so need to put that on channel 1 and save that already. So this is what happens when you show off a template that you're still working on. So we have the Spitfire LCO. So you can see, well, let me bring that up a little bit again. You can see the buttons light up here for the corresponding key switches. So for example, long super Ponticelli. A little funny thing, I can also control mod wheel and expression on the iPad. But I prefer to use my controller directly. Because with the amount of data, the iPad seems to get laggy with sliders, so I mainly use it for buttons. Anyway, so how does it actually work that I can enable and disable with a single button here? So, like this. Let's bring that up again. Let's reload it. So enable, and then bring up VEPro, so we can actually see it in the instrument. Yes, so the instrument is here. As you can see, it's on MIDI channel, or on VEPro channel 6. I have 20 per instance. I think you can raise that number even. And on MIDI channel 1, for example, these violins. So in the View tab, there is an automation mapping. And this automation mapping is pretty much where it tells you what you want to do. So what I've done is these 2 buttons in the iPad, enable and disable, are sending on MIDI CC 127. I choose the highest number because that pretty much rarely gets used for any other stuff. So, and CC 127.0 is enable, and CC 127 at 127 is disable. So basically these 2 buttons, enable and disable, send CC data, 0 and 127, for controller 127. And this is what you set up here. So you got the source, what kind of controller you want to have. For example, here, MIDI in on channel 1, and then you got all the 127 controllers. So I set this to 127. And what I wanted to do is to, here you see the instruments that are loaded, and I want to disable the current instrument with that controller message. And the bad thing is you need to set this up for every single instrument that you load. So whatever instrument you have, and believe me, it can add up. So for example, here in now I'm at Percussion. When I view the automation mapping, you can see BAP, the new file for all the instruments that are loaded here. Same for ethnic is still not that crowded, so I need to put way much more in there. And when I started out with building this template, I actually used one instrument per VEPro Ensemble Pro instance, so kind of 20 contact instances on VEPro MIDI channel 1, VEPro channel 2, 3, 4, and so on. And I kind of realized that's a little bit silly to do it like that, because actually you can do way more, because you can have 16 different contact instances on VEPro channel 1, because you got 60 MIDI channels. And if I define MIDI channel 1 for the first instrument, and like here, the second instrument MIDI channel 2, I can have 16 contact instances on one MIDI VEPro channel. As I've said, it's a lot of nerd talk today. I hope you follow along. And this reflects in the automation mapping, of course. So I can set up the first instrument to receive on VEPro MIDI in 1, channel 1, 127. And the second instrument comes through MIDI in 1 again, but this time channel 2, 127. So pretty much you could, in a single instance of this VEPro here, you could set up 20 times 16 contact instruments. So 320 instances of contact, and every one of these contacts could house a single instrument or a key switch instrument, as you like. Whew, that was a lot of talking there. So let's bring this out of view for a moment and deactivate that again. We don't need it for now. And let's bring the iPad window a little bit down again. Let me know if you think you need it anyway. Otherwise, I could just get rid of it. And the main question with such a template is why? Yeah, the main question is why. So my aim was to what about the audio? Can you get for all the 60 MIDI channels per instance also 16 individual output channels? Good question. I didn't even talk about the audio returns yet. So let's bring up the mixer. We got this one here. Let me shortly effects and group tracks. Let me get rid of these. So these are the, let me start here. So for example, we have the strings slave that's connected to VEPro Ensemble Pro. And this guy has 34 activated outputs. And all these outputs are named, as you can see here: violin 1, 2, viola, cello, double bass, cinematic studio strings. Then it goes on, music assembling, violins, viola, cello, double bass. So every single instrument that I have in VEPro gets its dedicated audio return channel in Cubase. That's why the amount of channels doubles here, with 500 tracks and 500 audio tracks pretty much. So these down here it starts. VST instruments, these are the audio returns from VEPro. String slave, all the audio tracks. Strings DAW, so that's on my main machine. This is all the audio returns for the strings that I've loaded on my main machine. So for example, if I activate the chamber strings, and you could see that the iPad jumps to the chamber strings overview. So when I load spiccato, for example, so, and down here in the audio returns, you could see here, this is the actual audio channel for the return from VEPro. And it doesn't play because now I'm on the audio channel, not on the MIDI channel. And one great thing I actually discovered today, and this is something that I really love about Cubase, is that you don't necessarily need to jump if you want to edit something in the audio channel, for example, like adjusting the reverb setting or something. You don't need to jump down to the audio channel. The audio channel is present in the inspector for the MIDI channel, way down here. So you can set this up in the setup, what you actually want to see. And everything that you set up here. So this is the overall Vienna Ensemble Pro audio return. And here I can select which of the outputs I want to see, or the outputs. So for example, now violin as chamber strings. And if I, for example, think I need to adjust the reverb, say I want a drier and go to -18. Or even wetter, let's say just. So that works pretty well. Let's switch to the legato. So every single instrument gets its individual return in Cubase. Then let's bring that back to -10 where I had it before. So if I am, for example, then on the LCO channel here and say I want to adjust, it already jumps to LCO. That's great. But this does not. So for example, now here performance samples flute shorts, and then I want to adjust something in that channel. I choose that here. As you can see, this doesn't even have a reverb sent right now. Why not? Let's listen to it. Enable. How's the remote server connected? Yeah, gigabit network. I have not tested how many audio channels I can stream and reach the bandwidth threshold. So this is something that I still need to do. I haven't checked that yet. Maybe I have got just a good mixture from where I stream the libraries, either from the slave or from the main DAW. So yeah, so far I haven't run into issues. So for example, here we have the performance samples shorts, and I feel okay, they could use a little reverb. And for example, I still had that on chamber strings violin 1, and now I can switch to performance sample. This is actually the physical virtual physical output from the first instance of Vienna Ensemble Pro on my main machine, and these are the different outputs. So I have set it up that each VEPro instance has 30 stereo outputs, or 60, as you can see here, and I'm using here up to 3738. So this is 1519 outputs. And this reflects here. So I can change this, and for example, if say I want to have an audio sent to the reverb sent to the string verb with -12, for example. So that works like this. And the same when I'm damn it. Okay, so the iPad screen is hiding. So let's put the iScreen at the side. What I was showing is that here is the VEPro instances that is linked to my VEPro on my DAW, main DAW, as you can see here. And the outputs are configured here. I can show you that here as well. So in this instance, in the mixer master bus, you can see all the instruments that are routed to the various outputs. And these outputs reflect here in Cubase. And I don't, when I want to change something in the instrument channel of this certain instrument, for example, let's take the chamber strings 2. Let's enable it. It's loading right now. So and now let's say I want to change the reverb. Before I discovered that you have the channels here, you would need to go down all the way to the audio outputs here, strings DAW. This is the VEPro instance. Then go to violin 2 and then here adjust the send or whatever insert effects you want to use. So right now when I'm on the MIDI channel, I can do this directly. Usually I have this view, and here I can access this specific channel. So if I say I need these violins 2 to sound like they coming through a telephone, then I can just bring in an EQ here on that specific channel without going so I can do that in the mixer here in Cubase. Are you using the mixer within VEPro or the one within Cubase? This is actually a good question, pretty much both. So I have some instruments, for example, let's take the sample modeling horn here, for example. Let's activate this. So and since sample modeling is dry as you know what I want to say, I'm running it through VSS, for example, Virtual Soundstage, and this is something that I have set up within VEPro, so I don't need to bother Cubase with that stuff. So the horn, for example, sits here. If I switch that off, the signal that gets to Cubase is like this. So pretty much in your face, and with a virtual soundstage. So I try to put some processing power away from Cubase, so some stuff that I know that I don't need to touch. This can be handled in VEPro in the mixer directly. This especially is more important. Let's disable the track again here. Is more important on other instruments. For example, here in the guitars, there is some stuff like, where do I have something? I mean, the uproar guitar, for example, doesn't have any processing because it already sounds great. So I can just load this. Let's enable it for a short moment. So that's pretty neat, but that's not what I want to talk about. Let's go with where do we have it? H7S clean. I think this was on the bass, for example. Let's take the ample sound bass. That's the ample sound precision bass, and I just activated it here in my guitar instance. And for example, on this channel I have where is it? There we go. I got some amplitude bass amp going and some little bit of EQ. And this is all stuff that I can put out to VEPro to keep the processing power from Cubase. So my mixer is actually pretty empty right now. So there's, because as I've said, I'm still in the process of building everything and putting it together. And I had different approaches of how to handle reverbs and groups and stuff like that. So we will come to that in a minute. But overall, it's a mixture of having processing within VEPro directly and some after processing, especially in terms of reverb, within Cubase later on. So back to topic, let's disable some of the tracks that we enabled and don't need right now. We will try to work a little bit with this guy in a few minutes. So, so we had the return channels from VEPro, and this applies to pretty much all the different instruments. So we have the string slave with the outputs. For example, let's take something random here. Percussion loaded on my DAW, Cineperc and stuff like that, Hans Zimmer percussion, Spitfire sub hits and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, and as I said, I'm still not finished. And I wanted to get back to why. A little late, so I hope you will not. I hope I will not delete it from Twitch. Maybe I think they are just hosted for a month or something, and then they get deleted. But I would try to put it on YouTube. So for me, the main purpose of this new approach is to have pretty much everything at hand that I steadily use in my work, no matter what I'm working on. So I wanted to have a template that allows me to go orchestral in a classical sense, to hybrid trailer, to pop music, rock music and stuff like that. All within the same realm. Even I'm currently doing some stuff for some US TV shows, and just today bought the new Big Fish audio release sequence, which is pretty cool. And actually, this guy is the one of the few instruments that's not sitting in VEPro, because this is something I will change on a per cue basis. So pretty great little hip hop instrument. Let's play that for a second. So it's a little step sequencer. And it's pretty neat. It got great 808s with it. And you can change all the samples. So there's a huge sample pool in here. Pretty cool stuff, to be honest. So change the kick, and now it sounds like this. And even sidechained the 808. So this is, even though I want to do some hip hop stuff or something like that for TV shows, that's pretty cool. And I mentioned before some guitar stuff. Included the heavier 7 strings that we did a stream a few weeks ago. Let me activate that for a moment. This is really cool stuff. And I mentioned in the beginning there are some instruments that I need to get to on the GUI. This specifically happens with these kind of instruments like the heavier 7 strings. The cool thing is I can actually grab it here in VEPro and take a look at the included patterns. This is actually the 1.1 version where there's some new stuff. And can listen to some of the preset riffs they have here. And drag them. This is what I actually wanted to show. Stop can take them and drag them into my Cubase session from VEPro. So, and then I can change the MIDI data here and tweak it further. And then say, okay, we need some drums here. Let's lower. I'm still haven't included. That was a mistake on my end. Actually, I wanted to enable. Still need to set up a metal kit for the template. Still need to tweak the volume of the hi-hat here, but for the sake of demoing, let's just try something. Just for trying a little bit. Mikhel Zilmer, yeah, exactly. That's the guy who did some posts about his template approach, and I used some of his ideas in mine, especially for the visibility features. When I just want to see, so you don't see the iPad anymore. If I click on, I just want to see the guitars, so I can easily, for example, activate the metal bass. So what the riff is playing here. That's actually that's too low for me. Let's bring that up to a D. And I can copy the riff to the bass and get rid of all the controller notes and delete this, and let's see how that sounds. This doesn't sound at all because I activated the wrong lane. I wanted to have the metal bass and not the acoustic bass. Sorry for this. So let's take this one. So I just copied the MIDI data from the guitar to the bass track, got rid of the extra notes, and I think that's pretty neat for quickly working, especially when you think, okay, I don't want this anymore. I want to do something else. I got an idea for a jazz tune or something like that. So let's bring in a little bit of Project Sam Swing. So let's say get a simple groove going here. Two bars, we're good. So duplicate this and then say, okay, I accidentally activated the upright bus, so let's bring that up again. And there we go. So, just some basic fumbling around. Didn't pay too much attention now. And let's say, okay, bring in a little bit of a piano. Enable this guy. Just some fumbling around here, and this is something that I initially had in mind to really, no matter what I want to do, even could activate the finger snaps here. So that's really the question, not about your new template, but about your previous template based on disabling tracks in Cubase. When you put a lot of disabled tracks in one Cubase template, it becomes huge, over 1 GB for CPR file. This is what I exactly mentioned in the beginning, which is the only downside for the disabled template approach. Every time I use save a template, you're exactly talking about why I was so happy to discover this new thing to enable and disable in VEPro. So let's go on. Let's say, okay, enough of smooth, what is it called, elevator jazz. Let's do something. So. So, whoop it up. I think I don't have enabled the... Oh, I have. Maybe I played that badly. So, actually 16 notes. I have no idea what I actually played here. I just want to quickly show what I mean with approaching different. So let's say. So. And so we need some horns. Let's go with a 2-horn line from Symphonic, Spitfire Symphonic brass. So we go with Performance Legato. And bring in flute 1. Let me bring back in the, for those guys who came later, bring in the iPad screen again, so you can actually see where I try to put it somewhere there's not distracting. We'll put it in the corner down here, so it reacts to whatever channel I am choosing. For example, go to the brass from Iceni, and then the iPad doesn't turn because I haven't set up this channel. Go to tuba, Spitfire brass, and then to flute 1, and then I have my flute 1 controls. The runs and stuff like that. So all the let's start with the trill here. And now you can see the key switches that I actually recorded here, which are reflected in the expression maps. It's totally crap what I'm playing here, but that's not what it's about. And actually I need to put in the key switch for the horns. Now we got the performance legato here. Somehow that's one of the downsides that I found with the expression maps. It somehow doesn't recognize the first key switch that I press. So sometimes when I, for example, press the long note beforehand, I need to manually edit that. Maybe it's a bug. Not sure about that. I will need to look into that deeper and dig why this is happening. Nevertheless, I think there's a good example of why I wanted to have a template like that, to really go in different directions with pretty much in the blink of an eye. So having various styles. The stop note here. Let's put that in. how useful do you think it would be to use VEPro without an actual slave? If I hadn't the slave over there, I still would have the same setup. So having everything outside of Cubase disabled, like we did before in the template with the track dis and enable function within Cubase itself, is so much more relieving because of the short saving times for the project. When I save the project now, you can see that here it's right now 21 megabytes, and before it was kind of 1.2 gigabytes. So this is nothing compared to the other approach. And so this is absolutely, in my opinion, absolutely breathtaking. It doesn't matter if you add a slave to it or not. Having all these instruments readily available with a click of a button. So say, okay, we need some bongos from World Percussion. Enable this guy. Especially the whole percussion stuff. So most of the percussion is on my DAW, and say, okay, I need some. Well, let's go with epic percussion stuff here. For example, the Heaviosity ensembles. I actually put them together in one patch. So there's the wood ensembles and ethnic ensembles and stuff like that. And I put that all together. So this is the ensemble drums, I think. This is the ethnic ensembles. And then there's the wood ensemble. So this is pretty great to have all this stuff at hand. No, not the elevator stuff. Totally bullshit there, but you guess what I'm saying. And for example, then I added a lot of synth stuff. For example, all the ADO auras. All of them on their own channel, so I don't have to have them loaded already, but I can use whatever I want. So for example, let's add some tune percussion stuff here. I activate it, switch to the correct key. And now let's record something here. Activate the click. Where was it? I like that one. So click on, and there we go. Okay, if I actually had the drums play in time, that would work. Let's correct this for a moment. With eighth notes, hard quantize these guys, and maybe add in a little drum loop from that guy as well. This is something where I was saving stuff, so I don't have all of these on individual channels. These are all in one contact instrument. I actually can. Do you think if it's going to be on sale? I think you mean VEPro. I'm not really sure whether it has ever been on Black Friday sale. was lucky. I got the update to VEPro 5 and that was $90 or something like that. So let's use something like this. So hard quantize this, and then we have a little bit of orchestral hybrid stuff going on. And this is pretty rad. And now, so if I want to have an overview of what do I actually have loaded now, so I go to my control page in Cubase and can say, okay, show me all the loaded instruments. And therefore now I see everything that I enabled. So for example, now I see, okay, I enabled the easy drums here. Do I use these? Yeah, I use these there. So when I now say get rid of that stuff, and I disable again. So the strings, let them on, disable the horns, the flute, the bongos. So disable and no more sound. So I'm going to disable. And here, this is something, since I was lazy and didn't put every single of these loops on individual channels, but loaded a multiple contact instance and just put MIDI channel 1 to 12, I just need to keep in mind that I need to deactivate the first instance, the first channel, to get rid of these. So now there's no sound anymore on all of these channels. And I just mute the whole group and close it. But usually I may return to this and put it the same way as with the others and just make them single instruments. So disable this guy and disable. And we have the tune percussion. Don't need that anymore. The guitar, disable this. So what I need to fill it with is way more. Let's bring back the view of all instruments. So show me all. Need to expand the ethnic section. I started to bring in the big band stuff from Project Sam. So yeah, that's that. So I think I will do a short break. I give you another preview on, I haven't mentioned that yet. Next week, Friday, my new album is coming out. And I give you another preview of a track for that you definitely, hopefully, haven't heard yet. And exactly, Elements coming out next Friday, and I'd also drop you a link because I already It's already available on Bandcamp as well. So if you hop over here, you can be one of the first to get it and download it. Other than that, it's also available on iTunes. I think Amazon is coming tomorrow, and on all digital stores next Friday. Plus, there will be a physical release in October. So if you don't know what to do with your time, hop over and buy the album. And if you know what to do with your time, do it as well. And so for now, let's listen to one track of the album, which is Elevation featuring Gabi Kos on vocals. So, like a DJ, if you want to hear more, go and buy the album. Definitely worth it, hopefully. Really proud how it turned out, and more than excited about the upcoming release. But back to topic. Any ideas what we're going to do with the template? Any suggestions? What we're going to do today? Any wishes? Try my best to fulfill something that goes quick. Don't want to run the template to test. Next week I'm going to do behind the scenes on Elements, so we will take a look into some of, maybe one or some of the songs. I will see how that turns out. So if you're interested in that, congratulations to the release. Thank you very much. So we will take a closer look at how these tracks came together and what I used there, and how it was like working remotely with recording artists and singers and cellists and stuff like that. Maybe we will even have a little interview there. We will see. And so yeah, if you got any ideas what we're going to do today regarding music, actually I need to work on some reality stuff, kind of hip hop tension mix, so we can do something like this. Would help me along the way. So a little bit. I think it's one of the downsides of having such a big template. Where do you actually start? There we have the trip hop. Of course, that's why I need a 900 track template. Maybe use another piano here. Actually, I haven't made much use of my Spitfire LCO library. Maybe we can use a little bit of that and try something there. Yeah, that might be an idea. Let's go with that. Let's go with a tempo of 88, for example. Too sad. Like that. Let's start with this as a basic idea. I have no idea why it's... I think I got a bunch more... yeah, I think the audio buffer is pretty high right now due to the streaming, and that's why I have some issues with being on click or actually being way before the click, but shouldn't be an issue. And I cut the sustain pedal in the beginning, so there we go. So, okay, we got 8 bars there, and let's duplicate this and use a little bit. I had a nice little sound from Orange Tree Samples Drakus. This is just the harmonics. So turn the volume a little bit down. Something like this. And actually I made a mistake in the piano there, so I need to fix this as well. this. So, let's start from the beginning here. And let's try some texture there. Let's go with the Atmo patch from output ref. Let's try this. Let's see how that sounds. That one. So, quantize this guy, put the key over there, and make it 8 bars. So we can repeat it, as well as the guitar here. And I heard in that break before the loop repeats, let's try to bring in something like a single solo horn. Maybe let's do this with 2 horns. And since I forgot what I played there, too generous with the expression data here. Let's bring in some of Spitfire's LCO. Irregular tremolo, that's what it was. nice. I'm bringing the cellos. And they have no reverb. And there we're back at what I explained in the beginning, so I can just jump into the cello LCO and send them to my strings reverb. Like that, to be honest. I'm hearing kind of a trill there. Did it record? Yeah, that worked. So then we need a little bit of boom. Let's go with the Spitfire low booms. Let's quantize that a little bit. And let's try fingered guitar on top, a little bit of so. So let's tailor fingered, and let's use a little bit of guitar delay here on the acoustic as well. And push that a little bit to the right. But actually, let's do something there, because one of the great things about the new Ample Guitar libraries is that they now included the riffer, which is something really, really great. Let me show that you here. The riffer is essentially like we have in heavier 7 strings as well, MIDI performances or tablature performances. That sound pretty great. And you have totally different styles here. this is pretty cool. Pop arps. I really like the one we just heard. That was pretty soft and this is all MIDI based, so you can change it to whatever you like. Let's take this one. So I can grab this. This is something I didn't want to do. So I can grab it here and drag it right into my DAW, and then I have the MIDI data for that specific track or from that riff. So this down here is the actual string selection. So I don't need to worry about that myself. So and now I can change to whatever I want. So for example, since we have the C9 there that we start with, E major 7, E minor 7. So I just change it to the chords that I'm using. So let's see how that sounds. Together with a, let's bring that back a little bit more to the middle. A little bit much of delay there, so I turn that down a little bit. And actually, let's do that on the fader here. Then, for example, I have loaded Native Instruments Session Guitarist. Usually I had that in my project because changing the rhythms and stuff like that, but now I decided to, if I want to have some background strumming stuff, have some muted patches and some open patches, and I can easily play something like this. So for example, let's do it like this. This one can be hard quantized because it's loop based, so we definitely want to sit it on the grid. And I feel that we need a shaker here for that second run. So let's go up and look for the actual shaker stuff. Either play them with orchestral shakers. I think I have something from Action Strikes exactly here, and this is something that I haven't set up in the on the iPad yet. I made an expression map. I didn't want different channels. I just wanted to have so show you that here. In the percussion, there's the action strikes, and what I done is I loaded different patches. So the crasher, for example. Let's bring up the keyboard. Where is it? There. And also, for example, the modern shaker. And I didn't want different channels. I wanted to have them on the same channel, so I made an made an expression map with different key switches, and these address the same instrument on different MIDI channels, as you can see here. So the shaker there, and that way I can, when I go into the project here, say 8 bars, and want to have a certain loop, let's go with this one. So definitely the crasher is a little bit too much here, so I switch to the shaker, and then so that works pretty great. And then we can variate it a little bit, and it reacts to modulation data for volume. So we can do a little bit of a curve here. Bring it down and bring it up again, and then we have a little bit of variation there. And actually copy that over. So now we have 4 bars, and we can duplicate this, and now lazy, I'm just copying that over now. Again, a little bit much. Usually I could control the sample modeling stuff with a breath controller as well, so that might be even better. So I will set that up later to have it controllable via breath controller. And definitely need some bass sounding stuff in there. So let's go with the acoustic. Make sure I am the right. much improvised here. I think I made some mistakes in there. I like the second approach better for the C. To the LCO and see if we have some other string stuff that we can layer on top. Something like granular tremolo or okay, switch to I think it didn't catch the key switch that I made there. So let's, yeah, exactly. Well, it did catch it. So I definitely had something messy here with the modulation. Yeah, exactly. So there we go. And listen from the beginning. Let's bring in tenor trombone from Spitfire. On its own. Actually, where is the horn? Second horn. It's a little bit much there. There. So, and obviously this whole stuff is not mixed yet. It's just straight out of the interface or out of the sample library with little to no processing. Maybe let's bring in a little bit movement here. Let's see how that works. Maybe not this. Very soft. Just a little bit trying. And this is actually the fluid charts from performance samples, and they are laid back by -128 because that's the suggestion from the manual. They sound very lively, and I think I can even turn that down a little bit. Let's see how that works in context. I can even get a little bit more. Let's bring in, show me the keyboards, please. I make it short for today, and so I was just looking for the keyboard patch so I can turn to just show me all the loaded instruments, and that way it's way more organized than having all tracks inside. So this is all that we've used now. I feel that we still we could add some soft drums to the whole thing. So let's turn to show me the drums and effects. There we go. And activate this tune track drum set. This is sitting right now on drum there. We already have the shaker, so I don't need the hi-hat there. Show me all. What preset do you use for the gentleman? Let's have a look. The keys, the gentleman is upright intimate. That's actually a patch that I treated. So short walk through, open, a little bit more to the soft side. Equalizer is on with a little bit more body and air. Tonal depth on resonant. Transients more sustain than attack. Little bit more of the low keys and a tape compressor, and the anatomy as you can see here. So that's pretty much what there is to it. And I think this sounds pretty great. If anybody wants to know in terms of reverb, I mean, I haven't actually finalized the walkthrough with the audio returns and the mixer channels. So as I said, this is all the instrument channels that come back from my Vienna Ensemble Pro instances. Everything is pretty much color coded to give me a little bit more information. So this is strings, green, yellow is brass, and all that stuff. And as you see, all the instruments have their single channels. Solo horn, horns are 2, horns A6, and so on and so forth. And what I've then done, this is another trick that I took from Mikhel from his videos. If I add in the group tracks, so these are the final stems pretty much. So if I want to send out stems to a client, I have strings, brass, woodwinds, ethnic, tune, percussion, piano, synth, guitars, bass, vocals, drums, percussion, hybrid percussion, and sound effects. This is my current stem setup. I might switch the guitars to acoustic and electric and spread out the synth even more to kind of arpeggios and other things. We'll see. And all the let's get rid of the stems here so that we see more. So now there we have the audio channels, and all these are routed to these group channels here. And this is pretty much per developer. So strings, chamber strings, cinematic studio strings, and all that stuff ends up here. There is not much processing going on right now. So this is where I actually tweak the EQ, for example, for cinematic studio strings and things like that. So I don't need to do that on 4 channels, but on this specific string channel for cinematic studio strings. This is something that I haven't done yet, so I need to dig into that. I tend to try to use as little EQ and post-processing as possible, because most of the time it's rather a question of arrangement than fixing it in the mix. So when the arrangement sounds good, you don't need to mix much anymore afterwards. At least when you need to work fast. And easier said than done. Elements, for example, I didn't mix anything. It was totally out of my hands, mixed by Mathieu Halloin, and he did a great job on the mix for the album. Anyway, so this is bringing in some of the stuff. I feel we could use a little bit more violin stuff here. So let's try to add in solo cello from Berlin First Chairs. Enable this. And that takes a little moment to load because it's a rather big patch. But it didn't react. Why didn't? Because I changed the channels there. That was another one of these things that I had, a problem that I had in the beginning. So because I changed this, need to fix this shortly. Give me a moment. So viola first chair is 7/3. The second violin first chair is 7/2. So I actually used 4 MIDI channels for these 4 instruments, and now I have them on 1 MIDI channel spread out through 1 to 4, which is way more convenient and leaves up more space for other instruments. And that's essentially what we want to have, right? So, and now it should be working. 7/4. String not string slave, we want string DAW7. Damn it. Now enable. And now it works. Okay, there we go. Bring that in a second part. That was rather nice. Another thing we can add for the second part, for example, we are overall we are on E minor. So what's better than to, where are my vocals? There we go. Bring in the new vocalese 2. Just got it. Enable this guy, and we need this 1 note up. And now these phrases are tempo synced, which is pretty cool. Just hit random notes there, so you can tweak it to whatever you want afterwards, which is a cool thing about it. And so if you say this phrase, it was a little bit loud, so bring it down a little bit. Awesome for texture in the background. One thing that I just recently added, the output rises, so let's enable this. And this is something that you can see right now on the iPad. This is kind of my not a template per se, but I have some instruments, for example the Audio Imperial trailer guitars, for example. There are 13 different eighth notes types guitars, and I have put them in let's activate this. I've put them in contact that you can see here. Trailer guitars, there we go. And loaded them up 1 to 13, all 13 different patches. And I have created an expression map which just says MIDI channel 1 to 16. So when I have a contact instrument with kind of the same instruments spread out to whatever maximum 16 channels, then I can switch these instruments with the buttons of the iPad by choosing the individual channels. Channel 2. And the same for the 16th guitar. And the same happens here with the output rises, which is from output ref, special patch. And there you got different rises from 1/4 note to quarter bar or 1/4 note, half note, full bar, 2 bars and 4 bars, and this for 3 different options. And I was too lazy to make a single patch for every single instrument, so I can address these with these middle channels 1 to 16. So when I press on channel 4, I get the 2 bar riser and stuff like that. So let's take this 2 bar riser at half note. 5. Just looking for a little softer one. That. So now we have the riser, and I think it also correctly got the keys with there. So it names channel 13. I will at one point edit that and have the correct naming for the riser there. Last but not least, let's fill. Do we need. So let's try some of the heavy OSSD scoring guitars. Maybe just for the ending. And actually, let's use the beds and not the pulses. Disable this and I think we may find a softer one. So D sounds better there than F. And what else can we do? I think it's pretty crowded already. So let's switch back to, let's just view the loaded instruments. I can, by the way, I can also say just show me the tracks that contain data. So it narrows down even more. For example, if I want to edit something in the vocals here, I can just solo that. And for example, say I want to do a little bit of EQ correction. So here I can see these are the audio return channels. More volume. And even send a little bit more into the vocal delay, even though it already has delay from the patch itself. Bass note missing. And let's bring that in with cellos here. should still be on the right key switch. There's a lot more going on in terms of articulations here. So we didn't even record a single one, but I used Vivid Long, I guess. Actually, I wanted to change this. This swoosh comes a little bit too late. Yeah, exactly. Wasn't quantized. Copying over that trill from the flute. Here on the last notes. So I'm adding the bass note there together with the piano on the low E. Softer. Now I need to figure out which key switch is the harmonics for the ample guitar. So okay, C sharp. So at some point in time I will have key switches for all instruments and not key switches, TouchOSC templates. I think we're good. Last one a little bit too high. So let's see the guitars on their own. Nice. So yeah, that's a little bit fumbling around and walking through the current and new template. So I could go to the last mixer channel here, so all the group stems end up here in the mixer channel. So we could easily say, let's do a little bit of tweaking for the master. I don't want to do too much here, so just bring in a little bit of the Cubase maximizer. I actually like the clarity of this guy. Sounds pretty awesome in my opinion. So give it a threshold there. Let's say piano that I feel needs a little bit tweaking. So let's, for a short moment, listen to it on its own. I think that sounds better. By the way, VST performance is pretty nice. So that was a lot higher when I had all within Cubase with a track enable template. So yeah, that's it for now, and shall wrap it up. Little fumbling around with the new template. If you got any question, feel free to leave them in the YouTube comments. Or like the Facebook page, have a look at www.cwvi.de. And of course, if you want to support the stream or myself, go and buy the album that's coming out. I will post the link to the Bandcamp page underneath the video as well, so you can grab it there. Thanks for joining for live viewing, and yeah, hope you got something out of it. And yeah, if you got any questions, let me know. See you next week for an insight on the tracks of Elements. Talk soon.